Before they sold the house, they buried her in its silence. The road leading to the forest was long, unpaved, and cruel, its gravel biting into the tires of the SUV that carried Amara away from the only life she had known. Inside that vehicle, silence reigned louder than judgment. Madam sat with her arms crossed, eyes forward, face emotionless, as though she had already erased the girl beside her. Amara, barely 18, her belly swollen with a child she never asked for, clenched her trembling hands in her lap. Her uniform, the once neatly ironed attire of a housemaid, was now stained with tears, sweat, and the memory of betrayal. She dared not speak. She dared not cry. She had done that already, behind closed kitchen doors and empty corridors, and her tears had earned her nothing but mockery. Sir had not even denied it. Not when she had knocked on the master bedroom door, her voice shaking, telling him about the missed periods, the nausea, the weight she was carrying. "You'll ruin everything," he had hissed. "Handle it quietly, or you'll regret ever stepping foot in this house." Madam had found out 2 weeks later. Not from Sir, but from the whispers of the cook. What followed was a storm of insults, slaps, and threats. She was accused of seduction, of witchcraft, of deliberately trapping her husband. "Trash like you doesn't deserve pity," Madam had spat before instructing the driver to prepare the vehicle. And now, here they were. The gravel stopped. The forest began. The driver stepped out first. Without a word, he opened her door, avoiding her eyes. Madam stepped out next, tossed a black plastic bag on the ground. A bag that held a bottle of water, a cloth wrapper, and an envelope with exactly 1,000 naira. No food, no phone, no goodbye. They got back in. The engine hummed, and just like that, they vanished. The forest closed in around her, thick with shadows, silence, and mosquitoes that buzzed like ghosts. Amara stood still, her bare feet on damp soil, listening to the absence of mercy. The trees, tall and motionless, felt like judges passing sentence. She didn't scream. She didn't chase after the SUV. Instead, she sat, hands around her belly, and began to hum an old lullaby her mother used to sing back when the world was gentler. Memories flooded her mind, not just of the house she'd been thrown from, but of how that house had swallowed her piece by piece. Her first day in uniform, eager to serve. The afternoon she'd polished Madam's marble floors till her knuckles bled. The night Sir returned from his business trips and smiled too long at her. The birthdays spent scrubbing toilets while Madam's children played with cakes Amara would never taste. She had given them everything, her energy, her body, her loyalty. In return, they gave her shame. But shame has a strange way of becoming fuel. That night, curled under a tree with only stars as witnesses, Amara whispered a vow into the darkness. She would survive. She would not be a forgotten page in someone else's story. She would turn this pain into purpose. The child growing within her would not be born to silence. He would hear the roar of his mother's resurrection. Days passed. The old woman who found her was as silent as the forest, but her hands were kind. She brought herbs, wrapped Amara in cloth, and led her to a village far from the mansion's walls. It was there Amara gave birth, screaming into the night as if releasing every injustice from her bones. The boy was small, but fierce, his cry loud and unashamed. She named him Obi, meaning heart, because that's what she had to grow to survive. Years passed. She worked. She learned. She built. From selling plantain by the roadside to learning sewing from borrowed books, Amara transformed. Pain became cloth. Sorrow became thread. Every stitch she made was a piece of herself being reborn. One customer became 10. 10 became 100. Soon her brand, Obi Wares, was known beyond the village. Known for dignity, for strength, for women who refused to break. Then came the email. An old property, once grand, now repossessed and on auction. Address, no. 14 Jasmine Crescent. The mansion. She didn't hesitate. She wore her best dress, held Obi's hand, and walked into that auction room like she owned it. Because she did, even before she signed. Other bidders came with briefcases. She came with purpose. Her bid was the last. The silence that followed was deafening. When the gavel dropped, Amara didn't smile. She just exhaled, as if finally releasing the breath she'd held since that day in the forest. On moving day, she entered the gate slowly. The same gravel crunched under her heels. The same trees lined the driveway. But this time, no one was driving her out. Inside, the house smelled of dust and forgotten wealth. The walls echoed with ghosts. She walked to the main hall, touched the marble floor she once scrubbed, and stood where Madam had once screamed. The silence greeted her like an old friend. Obi ran up the staircase, laughter filling the air. Amara turned, looked out the window, and whispered, "You thought this house would bury me, but I've turned it into my monument." Because the house where they buried her shame became her signature of power. Some wounds aren't visible. They are named Maid. Dirty. Nothing. From the first day Amara stepped into the mansion on Jasmine Crescent, she was reminded of her place. Not with harsh words, but with gestures, looks, and silence so loud it bruised her spirit. The gatekeeper only nodded at her. The cook never shared drinking water. Her uniform was always a different shade than the others. Madam, perfectly poised in her flowing robes and imported perfumes, rarely spoke to her directly. Orders were filtered through older maids. Amara existed in the space between walls and whispers. She was young, quiet, and eager to do her job. She wiped windows that overlooked gardens she could never walk in. She polished cutlery she never touched with her own meals. Her sleeping quarters were beside the store, a room without a ceiling fan and with a window that refused to close properly. But she never complained. She had escaped worse. Until one evening, the power went out. A blackout that lasted hours. Most staff had gone home. Madam was away on a church retreat. Only Amara and Sir remained. She had just finished clearing the dining table when he called her name. Not with command, but with a softness that startled her. She entered his study, confused. He asked if she was afraid of the dark. She said no. He smiled, poured himself a drink, and asked her to sit. She didn't. He asked again. She hesitated. He stood. What happened next didn't take long. Not enough time to scream, to process, to run. When it was over, she walked back to her room on numb feet. She stared at the cracked ceiling for hours, unable to speak. She felt filth crawling on her skin, in her veins. The next day, he acted normal, greeted her in the corridor, passed her the broom without blinking. She wanted to scream, but she feared being accused, of being dismissed, of being told she had tempted him. She had heard stories of girls like her. She thought about leaving. But where would she go? Weeks passed. Her stomach changed before her spirit did. She vomited in the mornings, felt dizzy in the afternoons. The head maid noticed. Then the cook. Whispers spread like wildfire. One morning, Madam summoned her. Amara stood in front of the marble staircase, shoulders bent. "You disgusting snake," Madam began, eyes blazing. "You planned this, didn't you? Seducing a married man to secure your place in this house." Amara shook her head, tears slipping down. "I didn't. He?" Madam slapped her. "Hard. Liar. Trash like you only know how to spread legs and lies." Within minutes, other staff had gathered. The driver, the gateman, even the gardener. None spoke for her. No one asked for her side. Madam continued, her voice rising with every word. "This is why we don't help your kind. Ungrateful. Disgraceful. Get out of my house." She was dragged to her room. Her belongings, a torn bag, 2 dresses, a photo of her late mother, were thrown into a sack. Sir never appeared. Never spoke. By afternoon, Madam re-emerged. "My husband is a respected man. You will not destroy us. No police. No drama. Just leave. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges." "Charges?" The irony burned. She tried to plead one last time. "Please the baby. Kill it. Or raise it in the gutter. I don't care." That was the end of the conversation. The driver pulled up, engine running. He was the only one who had once shown her kindness, called her sister, brought her fried plantain from his wife, shared jokes during chores. Now, He wouldn't meet her eyes. She climbed in. The compound gate opened, closed. No words were exchanged. The city turned to outskirts. Outskirts to bush. Bush to forest. No questions. No pity. Only silence. And that night, the driver who once called her sister drove her to the forest in silence. Some forests bury bodies. Others birth warriors. The first thing Amara felt was damp earth clinging to her cheek. When she opened her eyes, it was night. The moon carved pale shapes through a mesh of tangled branches. Her head throbbed, and her belly was tight with pain and fear. She tried to sit but winced. Her ankle had twisted in the fall. She wasn't sure how long she had lain there since the SUV disappeared. Hours? A day? Time dissolved in the wilderness. She dragged herself to the base of a tree, her arms weak, her mind flickering between memory and madness. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, a distant hoot, the snap of twigs, felt like a predator drawing closer. Hunger clawed at her stomach, but worse was the thirst. Her lips cracked. Her breath came in gasps. The forest was not kind. It was not cruel. It was indifferent. By dawn, her skin bore welts from mosquito bites. She tried to follow a narrow path, hoping it led to water or help. Her limbs felt like lead, but she moved. She had to. Not for herself, but for the life inside her. Her hands cradled her belly, whispering silent prayers, promising survival, even if the world had spat her out. By afternoon, she collapsed again. When she woke, it wasn't the forest she saw. It was a wooden roof made of mismatched planks. She was lying on a woven mat. Her belly was wrapped in clean cloth, and beside her sat an old woman with eyes as dark as charcoal and a presence that felt older than the trees. "You are not dead," the woman said, "which means you still have something to do." Amara could only cry. The woman's name was Mama Enyonam. She lived on the edge of a remote village that distrusted outsiders. But she did not ask Amara many questions. She just fed her warm broth, rubbed her aching feet with herbs, and sang softly as the young girl drifted in and out of fever. In that tiny hut with its cracked walls and smoky roof, Amara began to heal. Not from the forest, but from the betrayal before it. The villagers were wary. They whispered when she passed. They judged without knowing. But Mama Enyonam stood between her and their scorn like a weathered wall that refused to fall. "When a tree breaks," she said, "we do not blame the fruit." Weeks passed. Amara's strength returned slowly, but her belly grew heavier, tighter. The baby pressed down on her spine and stole her sleep, but she remained silent, never complaining. Her eyes no longer held fear, only fire. Then, one night, as the rains poured and the wind howled like a spirit in mourning, labor began. There were no doctors, no sterile beds, just Mama Enyonam, a basin of warm water, strips of boiled cloth, and the strength of a girl forced into womanhood. Amara screamed into the night, not from pain alone, but from everything. From what Sir did, from how Madam spat her out, from the driver's silence, from the forest's indifference, from the cruel judgment of strangers, from the ache of being made invisible. Mama Enyonam held her hand, whispered prayers in Iwi, and told her to push. And push she did. When the baby arrived, the room went still. There was no immediate cry, just the sound of rain tapping the mud walls. Amara's heart froze. Then, a wail, loud, defiant, alive. Tears flooded Amara's eyes. Mama Enyonam smiled and wrapped the baby in a faded wrapper patterned with golden suns. "It is a boy," she said. Amara reached for him. Her arms trembled, but her soul stood tall. She looked into his eyes, dark and new like untouched sky. "You are not born of shame," she whispered, her voice thick with love and war. "You are my justice." And as her baby cried, Amara whispered, "You are not born of shame. You are my justice." When pain offers shortcuts, only purpose shows you the road. 3 months after the birth, Amara wrapped Obi to her back and stepped out into the sun-baked dirt of the village market, her arms clutching a small bundle of firewood. Her legs were still weak, her stitches not fully healed, but hunger didn't wait. The baby needed food. The old woman had already given her more than enough. A roof, herbs, hands that did not strike. Amara knew it was time to earn her survival. The market was alive with chatter, scent, and suspicion. Most stalls were owned by old families. Outsiders were tolerated but rarely welcomed. She sat in a corner between two busy vendors and laid out her firewood. Customers walked past her like wind around a forgotten tree. Hours passed. No sales. Obi whimpered softly in sleep. That evening, a woman in a scarlet dress approached her. "You're new," she said, eyes scanning Amara from feet to forehead. "But you have something. A certain look." Amara straightened. "I'm here to sell wood. Then sell something worth more." She handed Amara a folded paper with an address. "Night shift. Pay is good. You serve drinks. Sometimes more. You'll never go hungry again." Amara watched her walk away, the red dress moving like a wound in the wind. That night, with Obi asleep in a cloth cradle beside her, she lit a candle and opened the paper again. It smelled faintly of perfume and regret. Her mind battled itself. Money meant food, rent, soap, medicine. She had no husband, no resume, no time. But then Obi coughed, just once, a small, human sound. She looked at him, tiny, trusting, curled like a comma on the sentence of her life. "No," she whispered. The next morning she gathered more firewood. Then she found an old abandoned stove and converted it into a display rack. She set up near the edge of the school where children passed daily. She carved out letters from banana leaves, dry wood. Small price. Business trickled, slow but honest. Villagers still whispered. They said she was hiding from something, that no father came to visit, that her baby's cry sounded too sharp. But she didn't flinch. Not when the sun burned her skin. Not when a goat urinated on her display. Not when she went home with only coins enough for Gary and salt. There were nights she boiled hot water and sipped it like soup. Nights she told Obi fairy tales she invented to distract herself from the growling in her own belly. Nights when her hands bled from chopping wood. But the mirror in the cracked window never showed shame. Only strength. Weeks passed. Then one evening, a man stopped at her stand. He was not like the others. He wore glasses taped in the middle, carried a bag full of old newspapers, and limped slightly from an old injury. "Your sign is wrong," he said. She looked up, defensive. "No, it's dry wood. Price is low," he smiled. "Your grammar. It should say low price. You wrote it how it sounds, not how it reads." She blinked. Embarrassed. "I never went to school." He didn't laugh. Didn't mock. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small book. "Start with this. If you're selling something, sell it right. Sell yourself right." She opened it, an old English primer, with pages browned by time. He tapped the cover. "You learn these words. I'll bring more." She nodded, lips trembling. "Why are you helping me?" He shrugged. "Because someone helped me once." But one man noticed the fire in her eyes and handed her the first book of her new life. Hope doesn't shout. It hands you a pencil. Every evening, Amara returned home with dust on her feet and splinters in her palms. Her firewood stall had become a quiet fixture near the edge of the school compound, where school children ran past in bursts of laughter and chalk dust. She often watched them from a distance, uniforms swinging, lunch tins bouncing, each of them unknowing of the ache she carried in her chest. One late afternoon, as she packed up unsold wood, a man stepped out of a classroom and noticed her watching. He was tall, slightly hunched, with ink stains on his sleeves and spectacles that slid down his nose every 5 minutes. Mr. Okoye, the village's English teacher. He walked over, curiosity dancing behind his squinting eyes. "You sell here every day," he said. "Yes, sir." "You always watch the students?" "Yes." He glanced at her crate. "Ever been to school?" She hesitated. "Only briefly. I can read small. He picked up a flyer she had used as wrapping paper. "Read this for me," she tried. Stumbled. Repeated. Then managed. He nodded. "You have more in you than firewood." She looked away. "I have a child. No time." then come after they sleep. My classroom needs cleaning every evening. I pay in books, not coins. And so it began. At first, she swept floors, arranged benches, and wiped chalkboards. In exchange, he gave her reading exercises, verbs, nouns, short passages. Her fingers trembled as she held the pencil. Her voice cracked when she spoke in front of him. But night by night, the stutter faded. Obi would watch her silently from the corner, playing with discarded chalk. Sometimes, he mimicked her voice, reading along. Amara would smile, proud and stunned by the joy in his eyes. For the first time in years, she felt like more than a mother, more than a maid. She felt human again. Mr. Okoye became more than a teacher. He became a quiet mentor. He gave her his old dictionary, introduced her to newspapers, taught her to ask questions. You must not only know the answer, he told her. You must demand better questions. Months passed. She began to help other women read market signs, price tags, and medication labels. A small circle formed. Widows, abandoned wives, curious girls, learning under the moonlight. One day, he handed her a form. Ngo training in the city. Tailoring, business skills, even public speaking. Fully funded, but only 5 women will be selected. Amara's heart sank. I have no credentials. No family. No references. You have me. She filled the form. Attached a photograph Obi had taken on his borrowed toy camera, prayed over the envelope before mailing it. Weeks passed. Then one morning, as she was arranging her firewood, a young man on a motorbike rode up with a letter. She tore it open. Congratulations. You've been selected. Tears flooded her eyes. Her knees buckled. Obi clapped. She packed everything that evening. Mama Enyonam helped her stitch her only good wrapper into a makeshift bag. Mr. Okoye gave her a list of things to say if asked questions. At dawn, she and Obi took the earliest bus to the city. It was her first time beyond the boundaries of bush and dust. The buildings stunned her. The noise overwhelmed her, but she held her son close, her application letter tighter. When they arrived at the Ngo gate, she hesitated. Her dress was old, her slippers thin, her hair undone. Other applicants looked polished, some in suits, others in clean Ankara prints. Amara felt small, invisible. Then, a volunteer walked over. Are you Amara Eze? Yes. He smiled, opened a box, and pulled out a new pair of shoes. Sturdy, navy blue, with her name stitched in white thread inside. These are yours. You earned them. She slipped them on and for the first time in years, stood taller than her fears. And when she walked into that Ngo center barefoot, they handed her shoes with her name stitched inside. When the world begins to see your worth, the mirror smiles back. It started with a measuring tape and faith. After 6 intensive months at the Ngo Center, Amara emerged with a certificate in tailoring, a starter sewing kit, and a heart swollen with possibility. The trainers, all women who had risen from struggle, hugged her like family at graduation. Her final dress design, an off-shoulder Ankara wrap stitched with messages of resilience, received a standing ovation. She cried, not for the applause, but for the memory of the forest where her journey had begun. She returned to the village with Obi, now 5 years old, and curious. He no longer called himself Obi. He called himself Kayan, a name he chose after learning it meant celebration. With help from Mama Enyonam, Amara converted the corner of an abandoned kiosk into her first sewing stall. She painted the door yellow. A hand-drawn sign read, Kayan Couture, clothing with courage. At first, customers were scarce. Most preferred established shops in the market. Some mocked her designs as too loud. But Amara remembered the Ngo's business classes. She unboxed the donated smartphone she had received and began photographing her work. She learned to use hashtags, filters, and captions. Her first post was a before and after of a ripped school uniform she had transformed into a Sunday dress. The post went mildly viral in a local tailoring group. Then came the orders. A small-time influencer posted about her service, calling her the queen of village glow-ups. Amara laughed, but her phone rang non-stop for 3 days. She bought new fabrics, took measurements for clients who came from nearby towns. People waited in line just to consult. She hired 2 apprentices, purchased a second machine, sent Kyan to a better school. The stall became a hub of color, laughter, and purpose. Clients left reviews with phrases like tailor with heart and woman with gold hands. One day, during a mentorship program, she was invited to speak at the varying go that trained her. She stood at the podium in a dress she made herself, hair wrapped in a blue gel, and told the audience, "I used to be discarded. Now, I design." The crowd stood. The cameras flashed. At night, when she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the girl left in the forest. She saw a businesswoman, a mother, a survivor. Then, the unexpected happened. On a humid Thursday afternoon, the doorbell above her kiosk rang. She looked up, smiling, and froze. Standing at the threshold was Madam, a little older, still regal, still perfumed. Her eyes flicked across the shop, the fabrics, the posters with Amara's face on them. Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked smaller, less certain. Guilt clung to her shoulders like silk too heavy to wear. Behind her stood a driver, not the same one. "Amara?" she asked, voice unsure. Amara didn't reply immediately. Her fingers held a measuring tape mid-fold. "Yes?" she said finally. Madam stepped inside, looked around. "I heard about your shop." Still, Amara said nothing. "I have a wedding," Madam continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I need something custom. Something powerful." Amara finally moved. Picked up her notepad. "Measurements?" she asked. Madam nodded. The past entered her shop wearing perfume. But this time, it came to buy. But in the midst of her rising joy, a face from her past walked in wearing guilt and perfume. Sometimes, the past doesn't knock. It kicks in the door. The encounter with Madam had ended quietly, but the storm it stirred inside Amara brewed louder with each passing day. Madam had placed her order, an intricate agbada for her son's wedding, and left without recognizing the woman who once mopped her floors. Her tone had been casual, dismissive, like years hadn't passed, like memories weren't still burning on Amara's skin. She had made comments while browsing fabrics. "I never understood why some maids think they deserve more. Honestly, they should just be grateful for food." Amara stood behind her cutting table, paralyzed. She nodded, took measurements, asked questions. But inside, her ribs caved with every syllable. That night, she rushed home. She opened a small box beneath her bed. Inside it was the only piece she had kept from that life. The uniform. Stiff, faded, still holding the faint scent of detergent and humiliation. Her hands trembled as she touched it. Kyan watched her from the doorway. "Mama?" She didn't reply. She took the uniform outside, placed it on the metal grill behind the house, and lit a match. As the flames licked the fabric, her breath caught. She stood there until it turned to ash. "I will not be owned by my past," she whispered. But the fire didn't silence the echoes. Her nights grew restless. She dreamed of forest shadows and SUV lights fading into the dark. Her appetite dipped. Her fingers shook while threading needles. Customers noticed. Orders delayed. Reviews turned cold. Then came a new shop, just 2 streets away. A sleek boutique opened by a woman named Funmi, with glossy banners, imported fabrics, and influencer endorsements. She undercut Amara's prices by half. Customers flocked. Some left without paying for pending orders. A few returned to mock her. "Your designs are nice, but Funmi gives it with a drink and gift bag." Amara smiled, nodded, but inside, her fire dimmed. She tried to rebrand, launched a promo, offered free fittings, but every tactic felt like gasping underwater. Kyan noticed. He brought her his school savings. "Use it for fabric," he said. She cried into his shoulder. Then, one night, just after a late dinner, the sky outside turned orange. A neighbor banged on her door. "Fire. Your shop." She ran barefoot, screaming, but it was too late. Flames swallowed everything. Machines, fabrics, ledgers, dreams. People formed a bucket line, but it was hopeless. By morning, only charred wood and twisted metal remained. There were no witnesses, no cameras, no explanation, only ash. And then, one night, her shop caught fire. No witness, no explanation, only ash. When flames take everything, what do you rebuild with? Ash still clung to her fingernails 3 days after the fire. The smell had soaked into her hair, her skin, her bones. She had watched her dreams die in the heat. Powerless, her screams swallowed by the night. The insurance agent shrugged. No registration, no claim. Her bank balance read 12 naira. Her son, Cayenne, had developed a persistent cough from smoke inhalation. Clinics asked for fees she couldn't afford. She sold her only gold earrings, gifts from the Ngo ceremony. But even that barely covered medicine. She stopped eating, just fed Cayenne. The walls of their home echoed. The sewing machine stood like a corpse. Her fingers, once so skilled, trembled even at the sight of fabric. One morning, Amara walked to the riverside, the same spot where she once washed clothes for others. Long before her rise, she looked at her reflection in the water. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, shoulders drooped like wilted sunflowers. She slapped the surface, hard. The water rippled. Her image disappeared. She sank to her knees, sobbing so hard the birds fled the trees. Her cries tasted like old rust, bitter, buried, unforgiving. She shouted at the sky, "Why raise me if only to destroy me again?" There was no reply, just wind. She walked home that day barefoot, dragging her shadow behind her like a defeated flag. That night, she opened a box of old letters, certificates, thank you notes from customers, newspaper clippings. Tucked inside the dictionary Mr. Okoye had once given her, she found a small torn paper. It read, "Survivors write in ashes. Begin again." The handwriting was his, her mentor, her first believer. She stared at the note for hours, as if waiting for it to catch fire and speak. Then, the next morning she packed a small bag. She kissed Cayenne's forehead and whispered, "We are not done." With nothing but a faded scarf and the clothes on her back, she returned to the village. She passed familiar paths, dusty roads, mango trees, corners where her old firewood stall once stood. People stared but said nothing. She had been legend. Now she was rumor. She sat on the same old wooden bench outside the church, where she once sold roasted corn. Silence wrapped around her. Then, just as the evening bells rang, a child walked up to her. "Someone left this for you," he said. He handed her a sealed envelope. Her name was written on the front, in handwriting she didn't recognize. She looked around. No one watched. She opened it, and on that same bench where she once begged, someone placed a sealed envelope with her name. Destiny sometimes waits in an envelope. Amara held the sealed envelope in trembling hands. She turned it over twice before breaking the flap. Her name was written in a soft blue ink, careful and deliberate. Inside was a letterhead from the Women's Rising Leadership Academy. She read slowly, lips moving with every word. "Dear Amara Eze, you have been selected for a full scholarship to our upcoming session on business innovation and social entrepreneurship. Accommodation, transport, and stipend included. We believe in your vision." Her breath caught. Cayenne sat beside her, watching. "What is it, Mama?" She looked at him with wide eyes, the kind that only rise after months of darkness. "It's our second chance." There was no signature at the bottom. No sender, just the stamp of the academy. Within 2 weeks, she was on a bus to the city again. This time, Cayenne remained in the care of Mama Enyonam, stronger now. Healthier. He cried, but she held him and said, "When I return, I won't just make clothes. I'll make futures." The academy campus was unlike anything Amara had seen. Glass buildings, cafeterias where no one whispered, rooms where women like her stood tall, many survivors of various pasts, all burning with unspoken ambition. She was the only one without a degree. The only one who came in with a scarf as her only accessory. Yet, she listened, she learned, and she led. Classes on entrepreneurship, digital branding, customer psychology, words once foreign became her weapons. She designed a business plan called Dignity Wears Us, a tailoring line employing abandoned mothers, using fabric patterns that told healing stories. Her idea was voted best in the cohort. Her face appeared on the Academy's banner, from Maid to Maker. One afternoon, during a mentorship mixer, she spotted a familiar face. Mr. Okoye, her first teacher. He stood at a corner, smiling. "It was you," she whispered. He nodded. "I knew the envelope wouldn't find you unless it went through someone who once knew your name before the world did." She hugged him. The kind of hug that closes a wound left too long open. Months later, Dignity Wears Us went from a plan to a presence. Local boutiques carried her designs. A Lagos-based fashion editor published a feature calling her the voice of textile healing. Orders doubled. Her face appeared on magazine covers. Radio shows wanted her story. She spoke gently, but her words held weight. Women gathered in her workshops not just to sew, but to remember who they were. Then came the invitation. A gala event. Regional entrepreneurs. Black tie evening. Amara wore her own design, an emerald green dress shaped like the leaves that once shielded her in the forest. Her name was called. She rose. "Amara Eze, founder of Dignity Wears Us. Please come forward to receive the Social Impact Award." She walked to the stage. The applause was thunderous. Then the MC added, "To present this award, please welcome our guest of honor, Mrs. Adesua Adigbite." The room shifted. She froze. A tall woman in gold stepped onto the stage. "Madam." Older. Still regal. Still powerful. Amara's hands clenched slightly. At a gala event she's called on stage, to be honored by a guest speaker named Madam Adesua. When power is given back to the quiet ones, the world listens differently. The room still echoed with applause, but Amara barely heard it. Standing beside Madam Adesua on that gala stage felt like the closing of a circle drawn in fire. Their eyes met. For a second, the past tugged between them, silent and sharp. Then, Madam extended her hand. Amara took it. Flashbulbs exploded. Time paused. The next morning, newspapers across the region ran headlines like, "From housemaid to honoree, the unstoppable rise of Amara Eze." Calls flooded her line. Interviews were requested. Fashion buyers doubled orders. But it wasn't the attention that moved her. It was the opportunity. One interviewer during a morning radio segment asked, "Why don't you share more about your early life?" Amara hesitated, then replied, "Because silence was once my survival. But now, truth is my offering." That evening, she wrote a long blog post titled, "When They Left Me in the Forest." It detailed everything: the household, the violation, the abandonment, the child, the fire, the rebuild. It went viral overnight. Women wrote in from cities, villages, even other countries. Domestic workers shared stories they had buried. Former employers apologized publicly. Hashtags trended. Activists rallied. In response, Amara launched the Cayenne Foundation, named after her son. Its mission: legal aid, therapy access, skill training for abused and abandoned domestic workers. She funded the first hub with her design profits. In 1 month, they helped 32 women. Then came a twist of fate. While attending a business seminar, a young real estate agent approached her. "You're Amara Eze, right?" he said. "I think I have something you'd want to see." He slid a brochure across the table. It was a foreclosure listing. A mansion. Cream-colored walls. Palm trees. Wide driveway. She looked closer. Her hands began to shake. It was the house. The same one where she once scrubbed tiles on her knees. Family defaulted on payments. "It's being auctioned next week," he said casually. "You in the market?" She said nothing, just stared. 3 days later, she walked through the gate of the mansion. The garden was overgrown, the fountain dry, but the walls were the same. The kitchen tile still cracked near the stove. She had slipped there once. The scent of floor polish still lingered in the hallway. She placed her palm on the staircase railing. "I never imagined I'd touch this as an owner," she whispered. The auction was scheduled for Friday. Private. Silent. Minimum reserve price. 8 bidders. She arrived in a black suit, tailored from her own line. Kyan held her hand. "Why are we here, Mama?" She looked at him, eyes bright. To reclaim the silence. Inside the auction room, bidders raised cards. Numbers were called. The price climbed. She waited. She remembered sleeping under the stairs, eating leftovers, crying into pillows that weren't hers. Then she stood, raised her card. "Final offer," she said. Silence. The gavel slammed. Sold. And on the auction day, her card was the last raised, her voice the loudest. Vengeance is loud. Redemption is quiet and signed in ink. The mansion was now hers. The deed was signed on a cloudy morning. The agent congratulated her with wide eyes, still not fully believing who she was. Amara signed in silence, her pen steady, her breath calm. She didn't smile, not out of pride, but reverence. She walked alone through the house before moving in. The floors creaked with memory. The living room still bore the shadow of that party where she served drinks on trembling trays. The corridor held echoes of whispered insults, slammed doors, and forbidden glances. In the servants' quarters, she paused longest. The room was smaller than she remembered. Or perhaps she had simply grown larger in spirit. She ran her hand along the walls. "You held my silence," she whispered. "But I speak now." Word spread through the neighborhood. The maid had returned, not with a bucket, but with a title deed. Some neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Others came to confirm the tale in hushed gossip. She bought it? The same girl? But how? No one had answers. Only awe. Rumors reached her that Madame and Sir had lost everything. Sir's business collapsed under legal scrutiny. Madame's social circle evaporated. They now lived in a modest apartment 3 blocks away. Amara never sought them. But one evening, dressed in a simple blue gown, she walked to their building. She stood outside their rusted gate. The building was chipped, its paint peeling like old secrets. A child ran past, unaware of the history walking beside him. She pulled out an envelope. Inside, no threats, no demands. Just a letter. Not revenge, just return. She slipped it under the door. Knocked once, and walked away. Back at the mansion, she instructed that no renovations begin until she had lived there, untouched, for 1 week. To feel it, she told the staff she now employed. To remember. On the first night, she and Kyan slept in the master bedroom. The boy twirled under the large ceiling fan. "Is this really ours?" he asked. She nodded. "We earned every inch." By morning, the mansion gates opened. Not for delivery, not for guests, but for the girl who had once been hidden. And the next morning, the mansion gates opened. For the girl who once slept in the servants' quarters. They left her in a forest. She found herself in the fire. Years had passed. The mansion now thrived with life, not silence. Every room bore art made by women whose stories echoed hers. Fabrics hung like banners of survival. Clients came not just for dresses, but for dignity. Amara stood at the window of her home, once their palace, now her sanctuary. Outside, laughter echoed. Her staff, nearly all women, many of them former maids, laughed over fabric patterns and tea. Her brand Dignity Wears Us had become a movement. 3 new branches had opened across the country. Each outlet provided shelter, skill training, and fair wages to abandoned domestic workers. Her foundation sponsored legal services for exploited girls. And her son, Kyan, now 16, had become a beacon of resilience. He stood tall, always respectful, always proud. Top of his class, speaker at school debates, and a fierce advocate for women's rights. "Because I was raised by a warrior," he once said. Amara smiled at that memory as she adjusted a scarf in her office. That day, like every year, she made a quiet pilgrimage. She took a bus. No fanfare, no entourage, just her, a spade, and a sapling. The forest had changed. New paths had been carved. The mud was softer now. But she remembered the tree stump she once gave birth beside. It was still there. Aged. Mossy. But unbroken. She knelt. Planted a new tree beside it. Not for pain, she whispered. For proof. She stayed there in silence, her fingers caked in earth, eyes damp, but calm. As she stood to leave, a young woman passed by. carrying firewood. They nodded at each other. A quiet exchange. A shared survival. Back home, Amara hung a new plaque at the mansion gate. It read, House of Return. Her story was now being taught in a social history course at the university. Filmmakers reached out. Book deals lined up, but she remained grounded. She knew her greatest script was written not in words, but in lives changed. She sat on the veranda that evening, watching Kyan help the staff arrange lights. He turned to her and smiled. She smiled back. Not every scar seeks revenge. Some scars build roads for others. Who tried to erase you? Maybe it's time you wrote yourself back in. Because sometimes, the house that broke you becomes the one that carries your nameplate. If this story broke something open inside you, don't leave silently. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we keep telling the stories no one else dares to. Comment below, who tried to erase you, and what would you say if they saw you now? And if you know someone who's ever been silenced, share this video with them. Because sometimes, the ones they bury come back, owning everything.